There you go. So this is your right. We hope to bring everyone together through a community that benefits the brands, retailers, and of course our end consumers. So over these 2 days, we have three interesting topics related to digital marketing and e-commerce. We just had a session on branding how-tos and increase brand awareness online, which most of you attended. Thank you very much. And now we're going to deep dive into driving your e-commerce traffic and sales, consumer goods trends. And this event is only possible because of our speakers. So thank you everyone for joining us, really making time out of your busy schedule. And each of you have prepared, I know, insights, examples to share. So really appreciate that. And earlier we just heard from Arthur and Hazel on the branding side. Now we're going to hear from Has Aminan and Will Cheneveau. And as well as tomorrow, we're going to hear from Jeremiah and Hidayah, more on the social marketing and the content marketing side. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to our two speakers today. So first, Has experience in branding, digital marketing, as well as B2B e-commerce. He's advisor to Poland, Asia's only cross-border liquidation marketplace. Hi, Has, how are you?
Hi, good afternoon. Good to be here. How are you all doing?
Good.
In the chat box next to the screen, I've put in the Pollen LinkedIn page so you can all check it out, because for a lot of people, this is a new trend of liquidation stock, but it is one of the key pillars of e-commerce. And I hope I can share some stuff with you today about how it's managed to grow so quickly in the last 12 months.
Thank you, Has. And yes, we have Will Cheneveau. He's Growth Strategy Senior Manager at Accenture. And he takes care of Southwest Asia, covering Japan as well, and focusing on consumer goods. Hi, Will.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So a quick introduction. So Will, those of you that don't know Accenture, we're a global consulting firm all around the world, helping our clients grow. In a lot of places, we focus on the strategy and consulting aspects, but also things like digital and back office operations. So I focus primarily on with consumer clients, helping them grow their digital commerce business in Southeast Asia.
Thank you, Will. So as our panels, we'll first ask some questions that we have collected through the surveys, and I know some of you have helped to fill in those surveys, so thank you very much. And then, of course, you can ask your questions through the chat. We also have a short Q&A session at the end of it, where you can just raise your hand and you can shout out the questions to the panel. Okay, so I'm going to kick off with asking our speakers, what are some pertinent trends in consumer goods, in groceries, that you think are super important for the brand e-commerce team to take note of?
Will, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. I mean, definitely COVID has accelerated the pivot to digital commerce. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, and probably why everyone is here today. The trends that we're seeing, for example, we ran some research on what is the impact of COVID on the categories. For example, what we saw, and this is some of the reports that you can see online on our website, is for Singapore, there was a 45% increase in weekly average sales pre-COVID and post-COVID. I think the key question that everyone is now asking is that trend going to stay, right? Are people shopping on digital commerce? Or are they going to go back to the old ways of shopping? And I think that's something we can discuss in today's panel.
Yeah, and just to add to that, obviously the trends in terms of consumer behavior has dictated that. For us, we see the trend on the supply side as part of the supply chain and trying to understand where it fits in between the supply chain team, the distribution, and the storefronts. And we find that pain threshold around moving goods is moving up from where it used to sit with the distributors through to supply chain, because they're having to ramp up production specifically for these new types of consumers. You know, e-commerce consumers are potentially different because they start buying different volumes at different frequencies, and those, you know, that means that they have to, you know, the change and the disruption goes all the way up to the manufacturing end. And as that disruption evolves, then, you know, e-commerce has to adapt towards those situations. I think, you know, we will have seen during the lockdowns that a lot of the, you know, in groceries, a lot of the products that used to be sold to trade, such as restaurants, has obviously shut down. So that's created, you know, oversupply in some areas, and they've had to repackage those goods for kitchen businesses, home businesses, and, you know, different. So that kind of, you can see how the problem isn't at the front end necessarily. And I know we tend to focus on the e-commerce, you know, user end, but, you know, I'm trying to understand where in your supply chain e-commerce will be most effectively implemented.
Yes.
So just to build on that, for at least for our Accenture clients, it's a big pain point, not just in the front office, so that we split it between front office and back office, right? So it's not just about solving for the front office and which channel should I be pushing on, but also what are all the complexities that come with, especially around the supply chain with e-commerce, right? The service levels that your consumers are expecting from an e-commerce channel are very different than your traditional trade or your modern trade, right? You need the delivery, next day delivery, you need free delivery. All of those kinds of expectations are putting a lot of pressure on the supply chains for each of the CPG companies out there.
Yes, at what quantity is it worth it to, right, to sell directly to the consumers, and who are the consumers, right? Not only households, but yeah, that we see group buys, we see this new all these channels, which I think we can definitely discuss more. Now we're going to run a poll actually. So we have prepared 3 questions as we'll ask, right? Do you think people are actually going back to the store? So that's actually our first question, and I want to hear from you about this, whether, and also about your investment in e-commerce, right? Like, when did your company start? So Nanda, can you flash the polls, please, so that we all can participate? We don't see the poll, Nanda.
I've got it.
Oh, we see, you see? Okay, cool.
Whilst we're going through the poll, can I ask the participants if they know what slob is?
Oh yes, we have a quiz time. Okay, I'm going to send over chat. Does anyone?
Just to answer, I thought I knew, and I double checked on Google just to make sure I was correct. I was, but I just wanted to make sure.
One of the things about trends that we talked about just now is, you know, the production, manufacturing, supply side of FMCG and pretty much every goods has really, you know, fed through to the markets in which people are trying to shop produce that's produced locally, and people are trying to produce for consumers locally. That confluence has created, you know, a shorter delivery timeline. And so, you know, the trend for e-commerce is to address that rather than try to, fix the supply of Amazon USA all the way to Southeast Asia. That's not where the bulk of the business is. And if you're trying to, deliver to those kind of long haul challenges, you better have something worth it, because the complexity of shipping and customer management and quality control and delivery timelines is so hard. You should be thinking e-commerce is not necessarily long haul; it could be local.
Absolutely, yeah, and this cross border as well. Okay, so we have a few answers. A few folks say no, only new FMCG, but we have also separate line of business or support locally owned business. Gary says slow and obsolete inventory.
Gary's got it.
Gary's got it.
Well done, Gary.
Okay, we're going to share more. I'm sure Has will share with us more about slow and how we can ride on this trend. In the meantime, shall we have a look at the results of the poll?
Not surprised for number one. That's what we assume and foresee, and I think that's the consensus so far with most of our clients.
I'm surprised by number two.
Which part are you surprised by?
I would have thought people would have been a little bit higher on the spend, between 30 to 100% rather than 10 to 30.
Yeah,
just because, sorry, go ahead.
No, just a reflection on that. I think it's at least in the conversations I'm having with my clients, it depends on the percentage of your sales that are going to come from e-commerce, right? And especially in the grocery category, whereas today, we're less than 5% penetration. So less than 5% of your sales are coming from e-commerce. In the next 2-3 years, it's going to grow for sure, right? And that's the reason why number one is we're going to keep shopping online, but it's not going to be the 30, 40, 50% that you see. I mean, in some categories that are at 50% online, that's like your cosmetics, your luxury products, right? Everyone is buying that online. I don't think we're going to see that same trend for groceries. And therefore, that category is probably going to stay around the 10, 15% online, at least in the next few years, right?
Interesting. I mean, my perspective on that decision was how the transition to a digital business that can support e-commerce can work within the whole business. And the more digitally ready you are, the quicker you can turn on those different taps and adapt to the situation. If everything is physical and all your inventory management is on paper, e-commerce is not going to be a very quick an expensive option. It's just going to be the shop front where you can collect money. Whereas if you're already managing your inventory and your the processes and the logistics online, the idea of embedding an e-commerce solution is more long term, and the budget allows you to fix the whole supply chain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, given that I think we've seen that people are planning to spend more, right, into e-commerce, and they've already started, right? I think most of our audience here have started. Actually, the majority has started before COVID-19, so that's great. And then some of them also very quick to adapt, and also during COVID-19. So almost everyone is now on e-commerce. So given that everyone has a basic e-commerce setup, right? Do you have examples to share about how to grow or at the early stage of e-commerce? Right, what are the things that the brands, the e-commerce team can do to, of course, increase traffic and sales?
I mean, just picking up on what I just said, I think everything from the factory, farm, wherever the product is coming from, wherever you take over the ownership of that product, all the way through to warehouse management and through to distributors and sales, that is e-commerce. I mean, e-commerce needs to be implemented throughout this. So any strategy that starts at the top of the supply chain is likely to be much more effective. The second component is having a degree of focus around the product and the consumer, so you can test the capability and the automation that comes with e-commerce. Because essentially what you're trying to do is take the pain out of, you know, day-to-day repetitive interactions. So if you try to do too wide a, you know, range of products with too many different customer profiles, you're going to stretch your team, you're going to stretch the whole offering. But it's much easier. I mean, if for example, you know, you run a grocery business, let's start with ice creams and get ice creams right. Because, you know, the frozen food sector category all the way through the process of, you know, management and, you know, keep the cold rooms through to the shop front and delivery. If you can get that right, you can probably do dry goods. So it's trying to focus and get it right, and trying to automate as many of the steps in order to then roll it out to you know, to a wider geography and wider audience, wider consumers and wider product lines.
So just to build up on Has, I think if you're still at the very early stage of, okay, where we want to grow our e-commerce business, you need to look at what are the products that you're going to be selling on e-commerce, right, within your portfolio. You need to also consider the channels that you want to look at for e-commerce, right? There's a proliferation of channels similar to what we had before in physical trade, where, okay, do I go to cold storage, fair price, or a specialist retailer, right? So you need to make some choices in terms of the channels that you're going to make your bets on. And that depends primarily on what are your objectives, your marketing objectives. Are you looking for volume? Are you looking for more intimacy with your consumers, right? What kind of data do you want to get from e-commerce, right? If you put everything on Lazada and Shopee, you're not going to get as much insights as what you're going to get from your D2C store, right? Once you have that figured out, which is essentially your e-commerce strategy. Then it's around building your capabilities internally from a people, a process, and a technology perspective, right? Making sure you identify the capabilities that you need. Are they going to be something that you're going to need to do in-house, or you're going to work with a partner? There's a whole bunch of enablers out there that offer e-commerce services, and then the platforms are there to support you as well. So see how they can support you there, both from in terms of capability as well as a technical perspective. I'm sure Has can speak to how Polink can help on that side. And then after that, it's scaling and building and growing.
Thank you, Will. I think writing on that, what mentions about, yes, there are many different channels, and probably we can bucket into two. I mean, on B2C side first, right? Mainly on the marketplaces and D2C on brand channels. And then there's, of course, social, right? Selling as well through the social media. So what, do you think are the considerations and some of the things you've seen that brands have succeeded in either or, and then how do they strategize when choosing, okay, should I, because the resources are limited, right? Do I focus more on the marketplace first as the early days, or do I build first my own brand, my own experience, like you said, in terms of D2C? What are your thoughts on that?
I'll start, and I think in answering it, I'll also answer the question that was also put into the chat group by somebody from QB Foods, where the question is also included is, the customers want variety, but from a supply side, from a store side, how do you make sure you put the right products there with the balance between profits and sales? I think, having read the question, I've lost my train of thought, but I think the marketplaces, they provide the same services as traditional retail supermarkets. It's nothing magical. They charge for shop front space, they charge for shelf space, they charge for marketing support, advertising support. They are very reluctant to take in new products without big budgets. So none of those changes just because you're in the e-commerce business. So you really need to be well structured and well packaged when you start those conversations. And the flip side to that is the D2C that you talked about. I think D2C can be very effective. And D2C, just to be fair, doesn't necessarily mean a website. I mean, there are people who are doing D2C on WhatsApp. They know their product, they know their consumers, they know how to create some sort of automation around that and just get it out there. So it can be very, very basic. I think it's about getting to know your customers, as you've pointed out, and having that intimate relationship and a feedback loop. And as long as you use that, it's obviously going to be much better than a marketplace. But the marketplaces obviously give you volume and commitment and different kind of muscle. It really depends on the things that Will talked about, the size of the business, the product lines, and knowing that once you're in the marketplace, your customers have a choice. They're going to look at what you have against what other people have. So pricing becomes an issue, shelving, space, marketing, all those things, brand association, affinity, all those things become an issue. So if you feel that you haven't built up enough of that market presence, the D2C is a manageable way of launching and running a product. And there is plenty of tools out there, Shopify, including, the commerce protocols that go into Wix and everything. There's enough out there for people to get involved in. So it's really dependent on how ready you are. But I think just to talk about QB, because I'm a fan, I'm a customer of theirs. The key differentiator I've found for them has been free shipping. The moment that they dropped the order size for free shipping, we became more regular in our usage. We used to go from 1 to 3 months because we needed to get $200-300 to get the free delivery, and now we can do it every other week. And that means that you're buying different goods. You're going from meats to cheeses and so on. So all those things become a factor.
Yeah, I think just a point to add on that free delivery. Last mile is the differentiator, right? Is what is going to differentiate your brand versus the others. That's where everyone is competing on, right? Both the marketplaces as well as the CPGs is about providing that meeting that consumer need, especially in terms of last mile, because the consumers now, they want that product in the next few hours because they have a recipe that they need to cook for this afternoon or for this evening. Right, and now there's an expectation in the market as well for free delivery, right? So I mean, Redmart has benchmarked it at $60-70, and I think the rest of the industry is trying to meet that, and that's putting a lot of pressure on everyone's P&L as well, right? So if you're going D2C and you want to be able to meet that free delivery expectation from the consumers, you're going to need to put that in your P&L. And depending if you have a broad enough portfolio, that should be okay because you can get your consumer to buy that $60-70. But otherwise, you might have some challenges to meet that full basket size, and then you could consider being part of a wider basket in an e-retailer or a marketplace.
Before we move on from this, I know that there were some participants that came from electronic goods and some tech products. One thing I have seen some of my friends do, particularly in the States, is launch their D2C offering on the crowdfunding as a way to create marketing noise, because every effort made in PR and in media, particularly trade, around specific products, relates directly to sales, and the crowdfunding gives you that immediate return that allows you to go to stage 2. I've had friends in the States who've launched successfully, multiple campaigns over the last 10 years, whether it's phone accessories, power banks, and so on. Just being very clever about creating the product and pitching it. So in that space, I think there is a lot to be said with understanding how crowdfunding such as Kickstarter works and being able to do a good job of using that as part of your launch plan before you go to full-fledged e-commerce, whether it's D2C or through the marketplaces.
Yeah, it sounds like there's definitely some trials to do in the beginning to try to find a sweet spot, right, between your offerings, your target audience, the basket size to meet the P&L, to make sure that unit economics work too, and then then later it comes the scaling part. I think what also is really what I think on the e-commerce team as well is how they can keep keeping their existing customers after they bought once. How do we retarget them, or how can we ensure that they stay the loyalty because there's so much competition? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start, but Will, I mean, the whole thing about what we talked about marketplaces and competition is part of that. But Will, you're probably better qualified. You have a wider view.
I mean, the challenge on loyalty is that, yeah, everyone wants also to have a loyalty program as well. So now you're competing for points and free products and other loyalty activities. So yeah, I don't think we've cracked it per se, and it's not an area I look at as much, so I can't speak that much to it. But it is I know it's an area of concern for clients as well. No one's cracked it yet.
Yeah, so any in the audience, participants, if any thoughts on loyalty, please do share your tips. I think next year I want to hear a bit about slop.
So I'll just give you a quick overview. I mean, slow-moving obsolete goods is a part of the industry that used to have a bad reputation, because that usually directly led to waste. And waste, for a lot of, particularly the multinationals, weighs on them, not only in terms of the loss of income from unsold goods, but the cost of management of those goods. And bundled together, the environmental impact then, has an effect on share price and stakeholder values. And so this is becoming an issue. It was always an issue, but it's becoming bigger, particularly because the production and manufacturing plants are becoming, dispersed, and there are now, multiple factories in every country producing the same goods. So there is less places for them to be able to isolate and shift those products. Whereas in the old days, we Southeast Asia used to benefit from the oversupply of the US. We now have our own manufacturing. So the question is, where does that go? And we can't all be going towards, whether it's Africa or North Asia or, these places. So it's becoming an issue. And second to that, the growth of e-commerce has created a problem around returned goods. Because as you can imagine, if you're buying 2 or 3 products and trying at home for size, the 2 that you return, very unlikely for them to end up back on the shelf. So where do they have to go, and what happens to that? So all those have created quite a big problem around liquidation. And what we find as we are moving first from FMCG and personal healthcare products through to foods and wide arrays, that you have to understand the needs of the customers, because the needs of the customers who are into this space is no different to regular distributors. Obviously more sophisticated, because they have different kind of shipping needs. They need logistics. They need to move stuff to markets that don't have clear import regulations. So regulatory issues become a thing. Obviously there's the product pricing and making sure that you're not cannibalizing other markets. So, liquidation stock sold in market as opposed to out of market. And sort of just regular seasonal trends. I mean, everybody's pretty familiar over the last 12 to 18 months, the oversupply of hand sanitizers, because we're now being offered it free every time we get a vaccine. So that's all part of the challenge of how to manage that oversupply and how to put it into the hands of people who need it, who can't get it. What we find at Pollen is trying to maintain the caliber and presence and position of the brand as premium, yet provide a conduit for it to reach the hands of consumers who otherwise wouldn't have that. So what that means is that if there's oversupply, say in Philippines or Indonesia, we would look to ship those to markets where they could benefit from that, and it can pass through the regulatory hurdles, yet not lose the, not end up on the discount shelf, so to speak. It still holds its position. It still goes into the hands of people who need it, who wouldn't otherwise have it, and at a price point that they can handle, as these consumers are sometimes not as well off. But it's trying to find that, and that's where our success has been. It's trying to identify those cross-border channels that allow us to do that. And at the buyer's end, I mean, there's been and I'm sure not many people on this call would necessarily appreciate it, but there are discount stores growing around the world, and here in Singapore we see them with whether it's Valuedora or Japan House or ABC Mart, and the growth of these is fed partly by liquidation stock, but partly by consumer demand. There are people who want to buy good products, but they don't want to buy it from expensive retail networks. So trying to make sure that these channels are fed and they're maintained, but don't cannibalize the markets where people want to go to, say, cold storage or NTUC fair price to buy their stuff. So it's trying to find that right balance and then trying to make sure that it grows. But in Europe, you know, stores that are now mainstream and not quite premium, but mainstream, like Aldi, started off as discount stores. You know, they were the discount stores that you found in, you know, rundown neighborhoods, and now they are, you know, some of the largest superstore chains in Europe. So this is, you know, this is a growth that's going to follow.
Thanks, Has. Yes, really giving the things, finding the channel, right? That so give the people what they need, and really managing supply demand. Right, it's a lot of
and avoiding waste.
Yes,
sure
definitely.
That it doesn't end up in a landfill.
Yeah. Yes. And in terms of like when we look at trends, right? In terms of like latest e-commerce trends, what do you think are some of the good resources that our e-commerce team could watch out for, and what are some of the resources that they can refer to when, you know, they need to make some decisions, whether it's related to last mile logistics, whether it's related to their marketing, you know, their investments as they plan their e-commerce growth plan.
I mean, I'll plug my Accenture.com website to say that there's a lot of resources that are available there in terms of our latest POVs, both on the front office as well as the supply chain side. If you guys search for Accenture Interactive, that's our main business unit that is looking after all of these digital activities. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of POVs on our point of, you know, our views of digital commerce and how that's growing. As well as on the supply chain side, what do you need to think about in the back office to support that e-commerce business? Otherwise, so other resources I would recommend, for example, Shopify has some good resources on trends that they see in the market. So feel free to look at that as well to track trends.
Thanks, Will.
In terms of, I mean, my idea of resources, I think Will's covered most of the readily available ones, but I would say as you build your teams, have a decent balance between the tech that bring the knowledge around automation and you know, the right tools technologically, but also the right biz dev muscles that might come from traditional sources, so that they can make sure that they understand the needs of every single step and can address those needs and make sure the deals close, because every unclosed deal is not just the loss of that lead, but the potential for a lifetime of leads and potential explosion. So that's really the challenge, is making sure that you don't lose any leads.
Yes, actually this, yeah, covers also like a bit of my follow-up question is, what are some of the watch outs, right? The pros and cons when you are looking at trends. Of course, we want to cater to customers' behavior, but every change requires investment, right? And every decision we make, we are doing calculations. Is it going to give me the return, right? Is this the best decision, best channel to make, to drive that revenue, the short term, the 3 months goal, the 6 months, the 1 year, right? Our top line. So yeah, do you have any insights to share about the pros and cons of as we take in trends?
I'm going to answer this so that Will can have the last word. For me, I think a lot of the people that probably on this panel, on this call, and a lot of people who are entering into the e-commerce business have not had that first-hand relationship with end users. So the real trap is being able to understand how to channel that user knowledge back into a useful loop that can feed back to your business, whether it's through a dashboard, through a Q&A, through more feedback, and trying to understand that. That for me is very important, because I assume, as we talked about QB, for example, they've gone from a trade distributor to now supplying multiple thousands of homes, and now they know their needs better, they know where the problems are, they know the challenges of the last mile. If you don't know how to capture that feedback, and if you don't respond to it and adapt to it, you're gonna have a difficult time succeeding. Now that doesn't mean that you have to give them your handphone number and be on WhatsApp 24/7, but it does mean that you have to figure out what customer service is. You know, when the customer is always right, when he's a big buyer, he or she's a big buyer in a trade sense, the customer's still right if they're just buying one piece or 10 pieces or a small, package. So trying to understand how that works, I think that's the biggest hurdle, because you go from very few customers who are very important to thousands of customers who are also very important.
Fully agree with everything you said, right? And that's the biggest challenge that everyone is facing with. In the past, it was about pushing product down a channel, and you don't really know where that product goes. You sold it to your distributor, but then you don't really know how it ended up on the shelves at the retailers and even who bought it. And now with everyone is kind of essentially changing business model, right? Before you were a B2B business, let's be honest, selling product to your distributor or to your retailer. Now you have the opportunity to really become a B2C or B2C and get those insights from your final consumers, right? The people that are actually eating your product or using your product. And to Hass's point, getting that feedback loop and the information and the insights from why is that consumer buying that product, right? What is the intent of them buying the product? They're not buying butter for the sake of buying butter, right? They're buying butter for baking that cake, for an event, for a night out, right? So there's a reason why they bought that product. Having that B2C channel now allows you to understand that intent on why they bought that butter, and then being able to provide a whole suite of offerings and value propositions to your end consumers around that core product that you have, right? So B2C really enables you to do that, but you need to make sure you also have all of the capabilities around it within your business to benefit from those data and insights. Otherwise, there's a lot of value that you leave on the table that isn't captured.
Yes, I do have a follow-up question on that, which is really interesting. But I want to also give opportunity to our participants. Yes, now it's time for Q&A. Please share your questions over chat or just raise your hand. We can see you, and you can just ask away.
I'm going to ask a question to Will.
Please.
Is there a liquidation center of excellence within the Accenture Group?
Not that I'm aware of.
That's interesting, because I think, I'm not sure whether it's necessarily a center of excellence, but it is something that's becoming an issue across the board. I mean, obviously it's different from traditional FMCG through to foods and groceries, and I think that's going to be an interesting challenge.
So I know that as part of our supply demand planning capabilities, we do, how do we analyze slow moving inventory? How do we cut the tail? That kind of stuff. But then, if that tail does exist, how do we take care of that tail? I don't think those, at least I'm not familiar with some capabilities in that space.
One of the things that would have come up in your earlier discussions with Arthur and others around branding, I highlighted. I mean, branding around B2C and B2B, there's some convergence, because people are working around limited supply of talent, limited time, being nimble. But I think it needs to continue to differentiate because it's a key thing.
Yes, actually about differentiation also, and about innovation in products also. We've seen more brands coming out value add products, right? Products that's even more convenient. And before there's only like meat, but now I've done something like ready meat, right? Almost ready to eat kind of product. And with that, want to hear also your thoughts on how do you see maybe more niche products, right? More like cater to a specific audience, and or value add products that really aims to create a new demand, in the sense that with, of course, the change of consumer behavior in terms of on e-commerce. Do you think e-commerce, it does help them for the more niche brands, for the more value add products, or you think, you know, e-commerce is one of the channels that, these new products should consider across.
Your question is specifically to if I have a niche product, should I launch first in e-commerce?
Yes, is there any edge to that? Yeah, or you've seen in your experience with different customers, right? Different brands, with probably when they are launching more special focused, targeted. As we go to D2C, of course, we also go, you know, more segmented consumers.
I don't have any stories to share, unfortunately, on launching e-commerce first. I haven't heard of a story yet in that space.
I see.
I mean, I think all the home businesses that have launched over COVID are essentially e-commerce first businesses, even if it's on WeChat or WhatsApp. I mean, that's pretty much, you know, they're taking orders online and they're cooking to order and creating to order, and they're supplying it, or whether delivery without, you know, it's contactless delivery. I mean, that's all those are key elements of an e-commerce business. They just happen to do it one order at a time instead of thousands of orders at a time. But if they get it right and they scale, they could grow, you know, to that ambition. You know, so I think, you know, the question is whether there is a need, a hunger, and where the challenge is for me. That's how I see it. And I find, you know, passion projects, you know, tend not to work, you know, but, you know, those are, you know, brands built around personality and influence and social media. You know, if you don't have the ambition to really go global, you're not going to go far. Because the world's, you know, full of trade shows that are showcasing, you know, multinational efforts around these ideas, you know. But I think, you know, it's difficult to tell from the profile of the people here whether we're talking, you know, foods, FMCG, electronic goods and stuff. I think that every one of them has a slightly different take. You know, within electronics, I said, you know, it's Kickstarter and crowdfunding. That's an easy one-trick, you know, way to grow and build something out. But with FMCG and with you know, foods and groceries, it's a whole different challenge because of shelf life.
Thank you, Has. Thank you, Will. Well, maybe would you like to leave your contact or the website that Will and Has you've shared earlier as resources, so that our participants can refer to them?
For sure.
Okay.
Thank you all for attending.
Do we have a few more cameras? Thank you, Gabs. Okay, Raphael said got to go. Okay, well, let's take a picture for this session.
Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining, and hope this is useful for you. Of course, thank you for also signing up for the sessions today and tomorrow. So look out for the confirmation for tomorrow's sessions, and also just send your feedback along, how we can improve it. And hopefully we what Has shared today and Will share today will helpful for you for your e-commerce and upcoming planning. And yes, hopefully everyone gets a boost in e-commerce revenue. And wish you everyone, of course, lots of success. And then see you soon.
Thank you, guys. Have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, Has. Thank you, Will. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.